Why does awakening feel like a betrayal? You thought it would be light, a sunrise, a lotus blooming, a hand on your heart whispering peace, but instead it arrives like a scream muffled under years of silence, like a splintered door creaking open at 3 a.m. uninvited. You didn't ask for this unraveling. You didn't plan to question everything that once made you feel safe, but something cracked, and once it cracked, it bled. You're not broken, you're just standing at the place where the lie can no longer hold its shape. And the truth? The truth doesn't arrive in affirmations and feathers. It arrives in losses. It arrives when the people who once clapped for your illusions start getting uncomfortable with your clarity. It arrives in your body, in that ache in your chest you thought was just anxiety, but was actually your soul knocking, begging to be let in. You used to numb that knock with busyness, with people, with pretending. But now the knock is louder than the noise. And here's the part they don't tell you. This is where most people turn back, not because they're weak, but because the truth costs everything you built on top of the lie. Awakening doesn't ask for polite change. It demands collapse. It demands you burn the map and walk anyway. You're not crazy for wanting to run. You're not broken for grieving your old self. You're just standing at the threshold, where everything false begins to rot and everything real still looks like pain. Welcome to the door. It bleeds for a reason. And you're still here, and that matters more than you know, because most people never make it this far. Most people press snooze on the soul's alarm, crawl back under the covers of comfort and call it living. Most people feel the quake and choose the illusion, but you stayed, even when the walls cracked, even when the mirrors shattered, even when your name didn't fit in your mouth anymore. You stayed. You're here in the holy ruin, trembling, questioning, aching. And that is not weakness, that is sacred strength. The kind that doesn't roar but endures. The kind that doesn't seek attention but holds the line between who you were and who you are becoming. No one tells you how lonely this part is. No one prepares you for the silence that follows the unmasking, for the distance that forms between you and the people who loved your camouflage. You're learning that awakening is not just about finding the light, it's about losing your place in the world you once belonged to. It's about watching the scaffolding collapse and having nothing left to lean on but breath and presence and the quiet whisper of your own soul saying, keep going. This is the sacred disorientation, the dark night no one posts about. When you can't go back to sleep but the light hasn't fully come. Where nothing makes sense but everything feels necessary, where your grief becomes a doorway and your confusion becomes a compass. And still, you walk. You walk with shaking hands and a heart that doesn't know who it's becoming. You walk without answers, without guarantees, with only a gut-deep knowing that something real is trying to be born through all this undoing. You start to understand that this death of identity is not a mistake, it's a liberation. Because underneath all the noise and roles and labels, there is a self you've barely met. A self that doesn't need applause. A self that doesn't hustle for belonging. A self that doesn't shapeshift for love. That self is rising now from the ashes of your former performance. And it's not clean. It's not pretty. It's not inspirational. It's real. It's raw. It's resurrection. You will weep without knowing why. You will ache in places that don't have language. You will watch parts of your life fall away and wonder if you made a mistake. You didn't. This is what it feels like to come home to what you actually are, not what they told you to be, not what success demanded, not what trauma molded, what you are. And slowly, like rain softening stone, you begin to trust the emptiness, to find stillness in the in-between, to stop begging the path to look like certainty and instead let it look like truth, messy, non-linear, inconvenient truth. And somewhere along the way, your breath deepens, your shoulders lower, your heartbeat slows, not because the pain is gone, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself in the process. And that is everything. So if you're here, at the door, at the threshold, with everything falling and nothing making sense, know this: you are not failing. You are being remade. You are not lost. You are being remembered. And the ache in your chest, that is your soul waking up. The burning in your gut, that is your power remembering where it lives. This is the moment they don't write songs about. The before, the unraveling, the holy undoing. But this is the moment that makes everything after possible. You're not late. You're not behind. You are exactly where the breaking becomes the blessing, exactly where the wound becomes the womb. Welcome to the door, and yes, it bleeds, but it also births. But no one posts about this part. The part where your skin doesn't feel like home, the part where your laughter sounds like an echo from someone you don't know anymore. Everyone loves to talk about transformation, but they skip the footage where your hands shake as you delete the version of you they loved. They don't show the night you couldn't get off the bathroom floor, sobbing into your knees because the ache inside had no words, just waves. They don't show the awkward silences at dinner when you can't relate to small talk anymore and every "how are you" feels like a test you keep failing. Unraveling isn't poetic. It's messy, mucus-stained, and slow. It's staring at the wall for hours because your nervous system is too fried to fake joy. It's losing your appetite, your ambition, your reason for waking up, because those were all borrowed identities. You were a patchwork of survival roles, the achiever, the caretaker, the good girl, the strong one. And now that they're shedding, what's left? Just you, raw, unfiltered, unresolved. This is why most people tape the old mask back on, because becoming no one before becoming someone new feels like death. And in many ways it is. Death of the pleasing, death of the pretending, death of the part of you that found love only when you betrayed yourself. You used to think healing was a glow-up, but now you see healing is a stripping down until only what's true can survive. And what's true doesn't always feel good. What's real rarely feels pretty. You're not failing, you're unfurling. And the pain is just your old self leaving inch by sacred inch, because this is the quiet crucible no one glamorizes, the holy disorientation between letting go and becoming. No one tells you that awakening feels like disappearing, that your voice might go silent for a while, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer recognize the language of your former life. You're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And in between those two cliffs is a vast, trembling void where all you can do is breathe and try not to run. You grieve things you can't name. You miss versions of yourself that never truly existed, only projections you perfected to earn approval, to stay safe, to be loved. And yet, even as the familiar crumbles, something quieter begins to rise. Not confidence, not clarity, but presence. A soft awareness that doesn't try to fix you, just sits beside you in the dark and says, it's okay not to know. And that's the beginning, not of a comeback, but of a rebirth with no script. You learn to live inside your body again, not as a performance, but as a practice. You begin to ask what feels true, not what looks right. You let your sadness speak without rushing to shut it up. You begin to move through the day, not by momentum, but by intuition, learning how to trust your pace, your timing, your energy, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. And yes, some days you still want to go back to being liked, back to being understood, back to the illusion that certainty equals safety. But you know too much now. You've seen what self-abandonment costs. You've tasted what freedom feels like, even if it's bitter at first, even if it comes wrapped in grief. So you stay, you breathe, you cry when the ache demands release. You laugh when joy visits you in brief, unexpected waves. You let it all be holy, the numbness, the rage, the confusion, the clarity. You stop trying to be impressive and start learning how to be real. You no longer perform wholeness. You embody fragmentation with grace. And this is what they don't tell you, that being undone is its own kind of sacred. That falling apart is often the most honest thing you'll ever do. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not late. You are in the middle of the shedding, and like all sacred things, it doesn't need to be understood to be honored. Let it unravel, let it sting, let it cleanse you of all the names you were never meant to carry. You are not becoming less, you are becoming true. And truth, when it first arrives, often feels like emptiness, but eventually it becomes peace, not the peace of perfection, the peace of presence, of finally taking off the costume, of finally coming home to the one who's been waiting beneath it all, patient, quiet, and whole. It's not the world you're afraid of, it's the reflection, the one that stares back when everything external fades, no filters, no performance, just you and the parts you buried beneath achievement, acceptance, survival. The shadow doesn't knock politely. It kicks the mirror off the wall and dares you to look, not at your light, at your rage, your envy, your bitterness, your shame, and suddenly you realize awakening doesn't feel like ascension. It feels like confrontation. The mirror doesn't lie, but it shows you everything you learned to hide. And here's the twist. Most of it isn't even yours. The trauma you carry in your jaw, the guilt that isn't rooted in truth but in programming, the way you shrink in rooms that require your truth. The monster isn't evil, it's unintegrated. It's the part of you that screamed no when you smiled yes. It's the grief you mislabeled as drama. It's the scream behind the silence. And now it wants out. Shadow work isn't cute. It's remembering the moment your innocence died and holding space for that child who never got to scream. It's watching yourself manipulate, control, crave validation, and loving the part of you that had no other tools. This is why most people turn back. The monster in the mirror isn't some external force. It's you, before the world taught you to be digestible. And it takes spiritual violence to let that version live, not in shame, but in wholeness. You weren't born split. You were broken into fragments. Awakening is the glue. And sometimes glue burns when it bonds. But you keep looking anyway, because beneath the monster is the medicine. And what no one tells you is that this medicine tastes bitter going down. It doesn't arrive in gentle doses. It floods. It crashes into the life you built on pretending, on pleasing, on never making anyone uncomfortable. It tears the wallpaper off the rooms in your soul you swore were just fine. It peels you back until your stories fall away and all that's left is sensation, raw, trembling truth that has no explanation, only presence. You don't heal your shadow by analyzing it into submission. You heal it by witnessing it without flinching. You let it speak without correcting its grammar. You let it rage without trying to pacify it into peace. The healing doesn't come when you feel better. It comes when you finally stop betraying your grief just to seem okay. When you sit with the part of you that was silenced and say, you don't have to shrink anymore. You get to exist here too. And that is a revolution. Because everything in this world has trained you to exile your complexity, to pick a lane, happy or broken, healed or hurting, light or dark. But you're both, you're all. You are a walking paradox of thunder and softness, of sacredness and shadow. And it is not your job to edit that into something tidy. It is your job to be it. To embody the mess and the medicine, to give up the performance of purity and choose truth instead, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you belonging, even when it terrifies the version of you that survived by being small. Because true awakening doesn't make you more likable, it makes you more you. It strips away the palatable masks until your soul is naked in its complexity, bold, raw, sometimes wild, but real. And once you've tasted that kind of real, the kind that doesn't need to be packaged or polished, you can't go back to pretending. You don't want to. You start letting people leave, not out of spite, but out of sovereignty. You stop contorting your truth to keep fragile connections intact. You begin to understand that love, real love, doesn't require you to amputate your depth. And you finally start giving that love to yourself. You look in the mirror and see not a monster, but a mosaic made of wounds and wisdom, of scars and stardust. You begin to honor the chaos that made you, the shadow that sharpened you, the pain that peeled you open. And no, it doesn't mean it gets easier, but it does get truer. And that truth is where your freedom lives, not in fixing yourself, but in reclaiming what you were told to hide, not in becoming better, but in becoming whole. So when the reflection shows its teeth, when the shadow whispers your secrets, when the ache in your chest feels unbearable, stay. Stay with it. Stay with you, because you're not facing a demon. You're facing your return. And beneath the monster is the medicine, and beneath the medicine is you. No one warns you that awakening is lonely. Not the cute kind, not the spa day solitude sold in Instagram quotes, but the kind where silence becomes your only friend. Where your phone stops lighting up, where your name disappears from invitations. You start realizing most of your connections were contracts signed in unconsciousness. I'll stay small if you love me. I'll stay asleep if you stay close. But now you're waking up. And the cost is everything built on staying asleep. You sit in rooms you no longer belong to, speaking languages that now taste like ash in your mouth. You used to fear being alone. Now you fear returning to places that made you betray yourself. The silence feels endless. Your laughter feels foreign, and your prayers start to sound like questions. Did I mess this up? Am I too much now? Is this what truth costs? Yes, and more. But in that desolate stillness, something stirs, something sacred. You start hearing things again, your own heartbeat, your own intuition, your own buried voice, trembling but alive. You cry not because you're broken, but because you finally stopped performing long enough to feel. And that feeling, it's horrifying. It rips you open without anesthesia, but it's holy too. Because for the first time, there's no one to impress, no version of you to protect. Just breathe, just being. This is where most people run, back to noise, to validation, to something, anything that fills the ache. But you, even in the trembling, stay. Because you're starting to suspect that maybe the silence isn't empty. Maybe it's sacred space being made for something real. Letting go doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in waves, in flashbacks, in half smiles and unsent texts. You think you've released them, the places, the people, the parts of yourself, until you hear that song, smell that season, and suddenly your body is a graveyard whispering their names. No one tells you that grief comes after clarity, that you don't miss who they were. You miss who you were when you didn't know better. You miss the innocence of illusion, the comfort of belonging, even if it cost you your truth. Awakening isn't just finding yourself, it's losing everything that kept you from finding yourself. Friends you swore were forever, roles that once gave you worth, dreams that were built from wounds, not wisdom. You let them go, not in triumph, but in ache. In the silent surrender of realizing that alignment will strip you before it fills you. And here's the truth you choke on. Not everyone is meant to come with you. Some people were lessons wrapped in skin, mirrors held up until you were ready to see. And when you see, truly see, the spell breaks. And with it, the bond. You don't hate them. You just can't unsee your own becoming. So you grieve, not because it's wrong, but because you're finally right with yourself. And that version of you doesn't need to chase what walked away, doesn't need to convince what never really saw you. You let go, and it breaks you. But the break is holy. It's the crack where the soul finally breathes. The ache isn't punishment, it's purification. You're not losing, you're shedding. And what remains is what was always true. You thought lies were the problem, the masks, the illusions, the roles you performed. But the truth is sharper. It doesn't coddle. It doesn't arrive in whispers. It arrives like a blade in the dark, slicing through everything you swore was real. That friendship wasn't love. It was mutual fear of abandonment. That career wasn't purpose. It was a polished prison. That relationship wasn't sacred. It was trauma dressed in tenderness. These truths don't knock. They crash. And when they land, they don't just take your breath. They take your history. You start realizing that most of what you called normal was actually numbness. That your confidence was performative. That your joy had terms and conditions. The truth hurts more because it leaves no place to hide. It burns the safety nets. It rips the rug. And in the aftermath, there's only you. Naked, shaking, free. No script, no mask, no applause. Just silence. Just reality. And yet that very ache is the portal. The truth ruins your illusions so your soul can breathe. But before it liberates, it wounds. Before it heals, it haunts. This is where most people retreat. Back into curated cages, back into soft lies that feel like hugs. But you're bleeding clarity now. You've tasted the rawness of seeing, and you can't go back. Not because you don't want to, but because the cost of pretending has become unbearable. The pain of truth is a baptism. It drowns the illusion, yes, but it also anoints you, real, raw, awake. And the sting, that's just the veil being torn. There comes a point in the awakening where even your tools turn on you, where the affirmations feel hollow, where the breathwork leaves you breathless, where even your spiritual practices become costumes you can't wear anymore. You sit on the mat, you close your eyes, and instead of peace, you find a numbness that pulses like static in your soul, not sadness, not fear, just blank, empty, like the universe hung up in the middle of your prayer, and no mantra can touch it. You try to be present, but presence feels like glass. You can see your life, but you can't feel it. And this is the part no one posts about. The dark plateau, the valley between breakdown and breakthrough, where you've let go of the lie but haven't yet embodied the truth, where you float, untethered, unseen, unknown. You start questioning everything. Is this depression? Is this failure? Is this what awakening leads to? But it's not failure. It's the void, the sacred in-between, the place where your nervous system is still detoxing from decades of suppression, where your soul is catching up to your body, where your old coping mechanisms have died, but new ones haven't been born. You're not broken. You're paused, not by force, but by design. The numbness is not absence. It's incubation. The silence isn't punishment. It's rewiring. And even if you can't feel joy, the fact that you're not running anymore, that you're still here, still breathing, still willing to sit with what's real, that's the most radical presence of all. You can't meditate this away, but you can survive it. And in surviving it, you begin to live. There comes a night, maybe quiet, maybe thunderous, when your old self begs you to come back, not with logic, but with longing. You hear its voice in the things that once comforted you. The text you almost send, the plan you almost resurrect, the mask you almost reach for. Just pretend a little longer, it whispers. You were safer when you were numb. You were loved when you weren't this loud. And for a moment you believe it. You almost shrink again, almost trade freedom for belonging, almost step back into the skin that once protected you. Almost. But something stops you, not strength, not certainty, just the memory of what that cage cost. The quiet agony of self-abandonment. The way your soul used to ache under the weight of pretending. You remember. And the remembering saves you. This is the threshold. The point where the old life calls your name, but you can no longer answer. Not because you don't feel the pull, but because you finally know. Going back is a slow death in disguise. The bridge behind you is still burning. And ahead, you see nothing, just mist, just unknown. But for the first time, the unknown doesn't paralyze you, it purifies you. This is what they don't teach in spiritual books, that awakening doesn't reward you for arriving. It tests you for staying. It strips you until the only thing left is truth. And when you stand there on the edge of everything you were, shaking but still facing forward, that's rebirth, not in light, but in fire, not in bliss, but in bravery. You've come too far to return. And even if your feet bleed, even if your voice shakes, you walk on. Because something holy is waiting, not in the past, but in the becoming. If you're still here, it means you didn't turn back. Not when the silence got loud, not when the grief got sharp, not when your old life reached for you with sweet lies and soft hands. You stayed. Even when it meant shedding identities like skin. Even when it meant sitting in the ash of everything you used to worship. And maybe you're not fully healed. Maybe you still wake up some days unsure of who you are now. But the truth is that uncertainty is sacred. It means you're not clinging. It means you've stopped pretending to know where this ends. Because awakening isn't a destination. It's a devotion to the unraveling, to the unbecoming, to the holy now. If you're still here, it means the fire didn't destroy you, it forged you. It means you chose reality over reputation, presence over performance, soul over safety. You let the ego crack, you let the shadows speak, you let the silence baptize. And now you carry something deeper than confidence. You carry clarity, not the shiny kind, but the kind that hums low and fierce in your bones. The kind that says, even if I lose it all again, I won't lose myself. You've become someone the old you wouldn't recognize. And that's the point. You've crossed the threshold. You've lived the death. And now finally, breath by breath, you rise. Not with fireworks, but with a grounded roar the world might never hear, but your soul does. And that's enough. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be applauded. You just need to keep walking, because every step now is yours, every breath is clean, every moment is real. If you're still here, you've already begun, and that changes everything.